The sound of shattering glass echoed through my backyard as my sister Madison hurled my grandmother's antique punch bowl against the patio stones. Pink lemonade splattered across the white tablecloth like blood at a crime scene. 30 guests stood frozen, watching my 7-month pregnant belly heave with shock as Madison screamed, "This baby doesn't deserve a celebration." My husband Jake was deployed with his Navy SEAL team in the Pacific, or so I thought. But what Madison didn't know was that some battles aren't fought on foreign soil, and some warriors never truly leave the battlefield behind. I'd love to know which corner of the globe you're watching from. And if this story speaks to you, make sure to subscribe. Tomorrow's video is one you absolutely can't miss. It was supposed to be the perfect day. October 15th, 2023, cloudless Arizona sky stretching over our Scottsdale neighborhood like a blue promise. I'd spent 3 weeks planning every detail of my baby shower, the coral and mint decorations, the custom cake shaped like baby booties, the delicate finger sandwiches arranged on my late grandmother's china. At 32, this was my first pregnancy after years of trying, and I wanted everything to be magical. My sister Madison arrived 20 minutes late, stumbling through the garden gate in a wrinkled sundress and oversized sunglasses that couldn't hide the smell of alcohol wafting from her like cheap perfume. I should have known something was wrong, but I was too caught up in the joy of the moment. My friends Sarah, Jennifer, and my mother-in-law Patricia were cooing over the bassinet display when Madison grabbed the microphone from the gift opening station. "Ladies and gentlemen," she slurred, her voice cutting through the gentle chatter like a rusty blade. "I'd like to propose a toast to my perfect sister Rachel and her perfect little surprise." The way she emphasized surprise made my blood turn cold. I was standing near the gift table, one hand instinctively moving to protect my belly, when she continued. "Did you all know that Rachel here tried for 6 years to get pregnant? 6 years of disappointment, of failed attempts, of crying in bathroom stalls." The silence that followed was suffocating. My friend Sarah's hand flew to her mouth. My Aunt Carol set down her teacup with a trembling clink. I opened my mouth to speak, but Madison wasn't finished. She swayed slightly, pointing the microphone at me like a weapon. "And now she thinks she deserves all this attention, all this celebration, when some of us have been struggling just to keep our heads above water." "Madison, please stop," I whispered, but my voice was lost in the shocked murmur rippling through the crowd. That's when she spotted my grandmother's crystal punch bowl, the centerpiece of the refreshment table, the same bowl that had served 3 generations of Matthew's family celebrations. Without warning, she lunged forward, grabbed it with both hands, and hurled it against the flagstone patio. The explosion of glass and pink lemonade seemed to happen in slow motion. Shards scattered across the stones, catching the afternoon sunlight like tiny diamonds of destruction. "This baby doesn't deserve a celebration," she screamed, her face twisted with a rage I'd never seen before. "Nothing you do will ever be enough to fix what's broken in this family." The guests sat in stunned silence, some clutching their purses like shields, others staring at the sticky mess spreading across the patio. My mother-in-law Patricia immediately stood and began ushering people toward the side gate, whispering apologies and promises to call them later. Within 10 minutes, my dream baby shower had transformed into a crime scene of shattered glass and scattered napkins. As the last guest hurried away, Madison turned to me with a smirk that chilled my soul. "Hope Jake's proud of what he married," she spat, then stumbled back through the gate, leaving me standing alone among the ruins of what should have been one of the happiest days of my life. I sank into a patio chair, my hands shaking as I surveyed the destruction. 7 months pregnant, abandoned by my deployed husband, and humiliated in front of everyone I cared about. At that moment, I felt smaller than the glass fragments glittering at my feet. But what I didn't know is that this wasn't just Madison's drunken outburst. It was the culmination of a pattern I'd been too trusting to see. And soon, very soon, she would discover that attacking a SEAL's pregnant wife was a mistake that would echo far beyond our family's broken dynamics. Growing up as Madison's younger sister meant living in the shadow of her achievements until they started crumbling one by one. She was the valedictorian at Phoenix Prep, the scholarship recipient to Arizona State, the marketing executive who climbed the corporate ladder faster than anyone expected. I was content being the steady one, the nurse who worked night shifts at Phoenix General, the daughter who called mom every Sunday without fail. But over the past 3 years, something had shifted. Madison's perfect facade began developing cracks. First, she was restructured out of her marketing director position at Pinnacle Communications. Then her engagement to David, a successful real estate attorney, ended abruptly with whispers about trust issues and financial irregularities. By the time I announced my pregnancy, Madison was living in a studio apartment in Tempe, working part-time at a boutique fitness studio, and drinking more than she should. The signs were there, scattered like breadcrumbs through months of increasingly bizarre behavior. Last Christmas, she accidentally knocked over my announcement ornament during family photos, claiming she didn't see the tiny baby shoes hanging from the tree. At Mom's birthday dinner in March, she spent the entire evening making passive-aggressive comments about, quote, people who get everything handed to them, despite the fact that Jake and I had both worked multiple jobs to save for our house. Then there were the phone calls to my mother-in-law, Patricia. I discovered them by accident when Patricia mentioned being concerned about Rachel's stress levels during pregnancy, concerns that could only have come from someone painting a very different picture of my mental state. When I pressed for details, Patricia reluctantly admitted that Madison had called her multiple times, expressing worry about my emotional instability and suggesting that Jake should consider coming home early from deployment. The most chilling incident happened 6 weeks before the baby shower. I was at Target buying nursery supplies when I ran into Madison's former coworker Jessica Chen in the baby section. "Congratulations on the pregnancy," she said warmly, then paused with confusion. "Though Madison mentioned you were having complications?" She seemed really worried when she asked me about miscarriage support groups in the area. I'd never had complications. My pregnancy was textbook perfect, something Dr. Martinez confirmed at every appointment. But Jessica's words planted a seed of unease that grew stronger with each passing day. Why was Madison researching miscarriage support groups? Why was she calling my mother-in-law with fabricated concerns? And why did she seem less excited about becoming an aunt, and more anxious about what my baby represented? The night after the baby shower disaster, I couldn't sleep. I sat in the nursery Jake had painted seafoam green before his deployment, surrounded by gifts that my friends had left behind in their rush to escape Madison's meltdown. As I folded tiny onesies and arranged books on the shelf, a memory surfaced that made my blood freeze. 2 months earlier, Madison had offered to help address baby shower invitations. She'd insisted on taking them home to work on them, claiming her calligraphy was better than mine. At the time, I thought it was sweet, the first genuinely helpful gesture she'd made during my pregnancy. But now, staring at the empty guest book, where only 15 signatures appeared instead of the 40 invitations I'd given her, I realized what she'd done. She hadn't just sabotaged my baby shower with her drunken tantrum. She'd been sabotaging it for weeks, ensuring that half my invited guests never received their invitations. The low attendance I'd attributed to busy schedules or forgotten RSVPs was actually Madison's calculated effort to make my celebration as small and disappointing as possible. Sitting there at 2 a.m., feeling my baby kick against my ribs as if sensing my distress, I made a decision that would change everything. I wasn't going to be the victim of Madison's jealousy anymore. I wasn't going to accept her destructive behavior as just how she is, or make excuses for her cruelty. And most importantly, I wasn't going to let her continue terrorizing my family while my husband was serving our country thousands of miles away. Jake had always said that Navy SEALs don't leave their teammates behind, and they sure as hell don't let enemies threaten their families. It was time for me to learn what that really meant. The morning after my ruined baby shower, I did something I'd never done before. I started documenting everything. Every text message, every phone call, every interaction with Madison over the past year got recorded in a composition notebook I kept hidden in my nightstand. If I was going to confront this pattern of sabotage, I needed evidence, not just emotions. My first ally came from an unexpected source. Jake's best friend, Marcus Thompson, a fellow SEAL who'd been wounded in Afghanistan and medically retired, was living in Tucson while attending graduate school. He'd driven up for the baby shower, but arrived just as the chaos was ending, finding me sweeping glass shards while tears dripped onto the flagstones. "Rachel," he said in that calm, measured voice all SEALs seem to perfect, "this wasn't random, this was tactical." Marcus had a way of seeing situations through a military lens that cut through emotional fog. He helped me realize that Madison's behavior followed a pattern of escalation, testing boundaries, gathering intelligence, then striking at maximum vulnerability. Think about it, he explained as we reconstructed the timeline. She volunteered to handle invitations, ensuring low turnout. She called your mother-in-law, trying to undermine Jake's confidence in your stability. She researched miscarriage support groups, possibly planning to spread rumors about pregnancy complications. This baby shower attack was the culmination, not an isolated incident. Marcus introduced me to his sister Angela, a cybersecurity specialist with the FBI who owed him several favors. Angela taught me how to preserve digital evidence, screenshots with metadata, saved voicemails, archived social media posts. What we discovered made my stomach turn. Madison had been more active on social media than I'd realized, but her posts painted a carefully crafted narrative. To her friends, she was the concerned older sister worried about my high-risk pregnancy and emotional issues. She'd shared articles about postpartum depression, tagged herself at hospital locations, implying she was visiting me during supposed complications, and even posted vague requests for, quote, prayers for my family during this difficult time. But the most damaging discovery came from Angela's analysis of Madison's digital footprint. She'd been Googling terms like custody laws Arizona, proving maternal unfitness, and, quote, grandparent visitation rights. The search history painted a chilling picture. Madison wasn't just trying to ruin my pregnancy experience. She was building a case to challenge my fitness as a mother. The breakthrough came when Angela accessed Madison's deleted text threads through her cloud backup. In conversations with our cousin Melissa, Madison had laid out her strategy explicitly. Rachel thinks she's so perfect with her Navy hero husband and her miracle baby. But when Jake sees how unstable she really is, especially with all the stress I'm documenting, he'll realize she needs help. And I'll be there to provide it. Quote. In another thread with her former coworker, she'd written, I've been keeping detailed notes about Rachel's mood swings and poor decision-making during pregnancy. If something happens to that baby, everyone will know it was because she couldn't handle the responsibility. Reading those words felt like being punched in the chest. This wasn't sibling rivalry or jealousy-driven sabotage. This was a calculated campaign to destroy my credibility as a mother before my child was even born. Madison was building a narrative of mental instability and poor judgment, hoping to position herself as the stable family member who could step in if needed. The final piece of evidence came from an unexpected source. My neighbor, elderly Mrs. Patterson, knocked on my door 3 days after the baby shower carrying a casserole and a guilty expression. Honey, she said, settling into my kitchen chair, I probably should have mentioned this sooner, but that sister of yours has been asking some odd questions. Over the past month, Madison had approached several neighbors, claiming to be worried about my mental state during pregnancy. She'd asked if they'd noticed me acting strangely, whether Jake had expressed concerns before deploying, and if they'd be willing to speak with social services if necessary. Mrs. Patterson had found it suspicious, but hadn't wanted to cause family drama. A lot of love and effort went into bringing this story to life. If you're enjoying it, we'd be so grateful if you'd subscribe to our channel. Now, back to where we left off. She even took pictures of your yard, Mrs. Patterson admitted. Said she was documenting, quote, unsafe conditions for the baby. Things like your garden hose being out, or packages left on the porch. I thought it was strange behavior for a concerned sister. That night, I called Marcus with shaking hands. She's not just trying to humiliate me, I whispered into the phone. She's trying to build a legal case against me. She wants to take my baby. Marcus was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice carried a steely edge I'd heard only once before, during Jake's deployment briefing. Rachel, it's time to call Jake. This has moved beyond family drama into threat assessment territory, and trust me, SEALs take threats to their families very seriously. As I ended the call, I felt something shift inside me. The scared, humiliated woman who'd swept up glass shards 3 days ago was transforming into someone I barely recognized. Someone who wouldn't just defend herself, but would go on the offensive. Someone who understood that in war, you don't just react to enemy attacks. You anticipate them, counter them, and make sure they never happen again. Madison had no idea what kind of fight she'd just started. But she was about to learn that attacking a SEAL's pregnant wife was like kicking a hornet's nest. Painful, stupid, and guaranteed to bring consequences she never saw coming. When I finally reached Jake through the secure communication system, he was halfway through a briefing in the South China Sea. The connection crackled with distance and encrypted security protocols, but his voice came through crystal clear when he heard what Madison had done. "She destroyed your baby shower?" The steel in his voice could have cut through the ship's hull. "Rachel, I need you to tell me everything. Every detail, every witness, every piece of evidence you've gathered." For 20 minutes, I laid out Madison's campaign of sabotage, while Jake listened in the tactical silence he'd perfected during 8 years of special operations. When I finished, the pause stretched so long I wondered if we'd lost connection. "Jake, are you there?" "I'm here." His voice had shifted into what I recognized as his mission planning mode. Calm, analytical, utterly focused. "Rachel? What Madison did wasn't just family drama. She's engaged in a systematic harassment campaign against the spouse of an active duty service member. That makes this a federal concern." What I didn't know was that Jake had already been working behind the scenes. The morning after the baby shower, when Marcus called him with a preliminary report, Jake had contacted his commanding officer about an urgent family security matter. Within hours, the situation had been elevated through proper channels to Naval Criminal Investigative Service. "Baby, I need you to understand something," Jake continued. "Madison thinks she's fighting a pregnant woman who's alone and vulnerable. She has no idea she's actually declared war on the United States Navy." The plan Jake outlined was methodical, precise, and absolutely terrifying in its completeness. First, NCIS would formally document Madison's harassment campaign as a threat to military family security. Second, Marcus would coordinate with local law enforcement to ensure my safety and establish legal protections. Third, Jake's SEAL team, which had just completed their primary mission ahead of schedule, would be returning to the United States for family emergency leave. "How many team members are we talking about?" I asked, though I wasn't sure I wanted to know the answer. 12 of the most highly trained warriors in the world, all of whom consider you family now." Jake's voice carried a note of satisfaction that made me shiver. Madison wanted to play psychological warfare games with a pregnant woman. She's about to learn what psychological warfare actually looks like when professionals do it. The logistics were complex but elegant. Jake's team would arrive at Luke Air Force Base in 48 hours, officially on emergency family leave, but unofficially to conduct what Marcus called, quote, community engagement activities. They would establish observation posts around Madison's apartment, document her daily routines, and gather additional evidence of her harassment campaign. "We're not going to hurt her," Jake clarified, reading my mind across 8,000 miles of ocean. "We're going to educate her. Madison's been playing chess against someone she thought was defenseless. She's about to discover she was actually playing against grandmasters who've been watching her moves from the beginning." Marcus coordinated the ground operation with military precision. Angela provided real-time digital surveillance, tracking Madison's communications and social media activity. Mrs. Patterson and 2 other neighbors agreed to serve as civilian observers, documenting any suspicious behavior around my property. The psychological component was particularly sophisticated. Instead of confronting Madison directly, the team would make their presence known gradually. A black SUV parked across from her apartment complex, men in tactical clothing at the coffee shop she frequented, official vehicles conducting routine security sweeps of her neighborhood. "The goal is to make her understand that her actions have consequences," Marcus explained during our final planning session. "She thought she was targeting an isolated pregnant woman. She needs to realize she actually targeted a protected military asset with unlimited resources for response." Jake's final call before deploying came at 0200 hours Arizona time. "Rachel, I want you to know that what happens next isn't revenge. It's consequences. Madison made a choice to threaten our family during my deployment. Now she gets to experience what happens when Navy SEALs decide someone needs their undivided attention. The next morning, I woke up feeling different. Not scared, not defensive, but calm, with the kind of absolute certainty that comes from knowing you're no longer fighting alone. Madison had spent months thinking she was playing a game against someone she could intimidate and manipulate. She was about to learn that games end when professionals take the field, and Navy SEALs don't play games, they complete missions. Their new mission was simple: ensure that Madison Matthews never threatened the Thompson family again. As I made breakfast and felt my baby kick, I smiled for the first time since the shower. Madison had wanted to teach me about consequences and broken families. Instead, she was about to get a master class in both topics from experts who specialized in making problems disappear permanently. The war she'd started in my backyard was about to end in her front yard, and she had no idea what was coming. The morning of October 28th, exactly 13 days after my destroyed baby shower, Madison Matthews woke up to find her world had fundamentally changed overnight. She just didn't know it yet. At 0630 hours, she stepped out of her Tempe apartment complex to find a black Chevy Suburban parked directly across the street. Two men in tactical clothing sat inside, one adjusting what appeared to be surveillance equipment, while the other spoke quietly into a radio. When Madison stared, the passenger gave her a polite nod and went back to his work. By 0800, when she left for her part-time job at the fitness studio, a second vehicle had joined the first, this one bearing government plates. Madison's hands shook as she started her Honda Civic, glancing repeatedly in her rearview mirror at the professional-looking men who seemed very interested in her morning routine. The message I'd been waiting for came through at 0845, package has noticed the delivery team. Proceeding to Phase 2. Phase 2 involved what Marcus called, quote, community saturation. As Madison tried to go about her day, she encountered the same faces everywhere she went. The coffee shop where she grabbed her usual latte now had two customers in matching tactical watches reading newspapers by the window. The grocery store where she shopped featured a man in a navy t-shirt who seemed to be comparing prices on everything in her cart. The gas station where she filled up had a motorcycle parked nearby, its rider watching her with professional interest. By noon, Madison was rattled enough to call our mother. "Mom, I think someone's following me. There are these men everywhere I go, and they're all watching me. Should I call the police?" Mom, who'd been briefed by Marcus and was fully supportive of the operation, gave exactly the response we'd scripted. "Honey, are you sure you're not just feeling paranoid? Maybe you should consider whether you've done anything recently that might attract unwanted attention." At 1,400 hours, Madison made her first critical mistake. Panicked and desperate for answers, she drove to my house, presumably to confront me about what she suspected I'd somehow orchestrated. She found my street had transformed into what looked like a military checkpoint. A command post had been established in the Andersons' driveway next door. Their teenage son was a Marine recruit, and they'd volunteered their property for, quote, community security exercises. 3 vehicles with government plates were parked strategically along the street. Men in tactical gear conducted what appeared to be surveillance training, using high-powered cameras and communication equipment. When Madison parked her Honda and approached my front door, she was politely intercepted by a mountain of a man who introduced himself as Petty Officer Rodriguez. "Ma'am, I'm going to need to see some identification," he said in the tone that suggested compliance wasn't optional. "This area is currently under protective surveillance, and all visitors need to be cleared through security." "Protective surveillance?" Madison's voice cracked. "For what?" Rodriguez consulted a tablet with military efficiency. "We're conducting security assessments for military families who've reported harassment or threats. Are you here on official business, or should I escort you back to your vehicle?" That's when Jake stepped out of my front door in full dress uniform, looking every inch the decorated Navy SEAL he was. Madison's face went white as he approached with the measured stride of a man accustomed to command. "Madison," he said, his voice carrying across the street with parade ground clarity. "I was hoping we'd get a chance to talk." The conversation that followed was masterful in its restraint. Jake never raised his voice, never made threats, never stepped outside the boundaries of lawful speech. Instead, he methodically laid out exactly what Madison had done, the evidence that had been gathered, and the legal consequences she now faced. Harassment of military spouses is a federal crime, he explained, while his teammates conducted their very visible training exercises around us. Attempting to interfere with military family stability during deployment carries serious penalties. And making false reports to discredit a service member's wife, that's something we take very personally. Madison tried to interrupt, to explain, to minimize her actions, but Jake continued with relentless professionalism. The good news is that my team and I are reasonable people. We understand that sometimes civilians don't realize the full implications of their actions, so we're here to provide education. He gestured to the tactical display surrounding us, 12 Navy SEALs conducting operations that were technically training exercises but looked remarkably like a military occupation of our quiet suburban street. This is what it looks like when professionals decide someone needs our attention, Jake continued. My team and I will be in the area for the next several weeks, conducting various training exercises, community engagement, surveillance techniques, protective security operations. We like to practice in realistic environments, and this neighborhood has become very important to us. The final blow came when Marcus approached with a folder of documents. Madison, these are restraining orders, cease and desist notices, and formal complaints filed with local law enforcement and military authorities. You have 72 hours to remove yourself from any proximity to Rachel, her property, her workplace, or any location she frequents. Violation of these orders will result in immediate arrest and federal prosecution. By the time Madison stumbled back to her car 20 minutes later, she looked like she'd aged 5 years. The confident, malicious woman who destroyed my baby shower had been replaced by someone who finally understood the consequences of her actions. As her Honda disappeared around the corner, Jake put his arm around my shoulders and smiled at his teammates. Mission accomplished, gentlemen. The threat has been neutralized. Mrs. Patterson appeared from her front porch with a tray of lemonade for the SEALs, grinning like she'd just witnessed the best neighborhood drama in decades. That was better than cable television, she announced to anyone within earshot. For the first time in months, I felt completely safe. Madison's campaign of terror was over, ended not by lawyers or family mediators, but by 12 of America's finest warriors who decided that threatening their teammate's pregnant wife was absolutely unacceptable. The war was over, and we'd won so decisively that Madison would never forget the lesson. 3 weeks after what Marcus dubbed Operation Baby Shield, my life had transformed in ways I never could have imagined. The quiet suburban street where I'd felt isolated and vulnerable during my pregnancy had become a fortress of community support, military precision, and newfound confidence. Madison had vanished from our lives as completely as if she'd never existed. The restraining order was never tested because she'd apparently learned her lesson during that memorable afternoon surrounded by Navy SEALs. According to mutual friends, she'd moved to Colorado within a week of our confrontation, claiming she needed a, quote, start away from family complications. Mom initially struggled with the dramatic way we'd handled the situation, but her perspective shifted when Angela shared the complete dossier of Madison's harassment campaign, seeing the deleted text messages about challenging my fitness as a mother, the fake social media narrative about my supposed mental health issues, and the documented plan to interfere with my custody rights had shattered any illusions about Madison's motivations. I had no idea she was planning something so elaborate, Mom admitted during one of our reconciliation dinners. I thought she was just jealous, maybe acting out because of her own struggles. I never imagined she was systematically trying to destroy your reputation as a mother before the baby was even born. The most unexpected transformation was in my relationship with Jake's military community. What had started as a protective operation had evolved into genuine friendships with his teammates and their families. Marcus became my son's honorary uncle, teaching him hand signals before he could even crawl. Angela helped me start a support group for military spouses dealing with family harassment during deployments. But the real change was internal. The woman who'd stood helplessly in her backyard, sweeping glass shards while pregnant and alone, had discovered reserves of strength she'd never known existed. I'd learned to document threats systematically, build strategic alliances, And most importantly, that asking for help wasn't weakness. It was tactics. When little Samuel Jake Thompson finally arrived on December 15, 2023, his birth announcement included a photograph that captured everything about our new reality. Jake held our son while surrounded by 11 other Navy SEALs, all in dress uniforms, all grinning with the pride of men who'd successfully completed a mission they cared about personally. The caption read, "Samuel Thompson, born into the world's most protective extended family. Some babies have godparents. Sam has a team." 6 months later, I received an unexpected message through Facebook from a woman named Jennifer Park in San Diego. Her sister-in-law had been conducting a similar harassment campaign during her pregnancy, and Jennifer had seen our story through military spouse networks. Could I help her understand how to document evidence and build legal protections? That conversation led to another, then another. Within a year, I'd helped coordinate protective interventions for 12 different military families, dealing with harassment, sabotage, or threats from relatives who didn't understand that attacking service members' families brings consequences they can't imagine. Jake supported my new mission completely. "You turned your worst experience into your greatest strength," he said one evening as we watched Sam crawl around our living room, which still displayed photos from his triumphant baby shower redo, the one Jake's team had organized with military precision and genuine joy. The final piece of closure came 18 months later when I received a letter from Madison. She was engaged to a man she'd met in Denver, working as a fitness instructor, and attending therapy to address what she described as, quote, competitive jealousy and destructive impulses. The letter was carefully worded, clearly reviewed by a lawyer, but seemed genuinely remorseful. "I understand now that I was trying to tear down your happiness because I felt like a failure in my own life," she wrote. "What I did was unforgivable, and I don't expect forgiveness. But I want you to know that seeing the consequences of my actions, really understanding how much damage I'd planned to cause, was the wake-up call I needed to get help." I never responded to the letter, but I didn't throw it away either. Madison had taught me something valuable about the difference between justice and revenge. Justice was ensuring she could never threaten my family again. Revenge would have been trying to destroy her life the way she'd tried to destroy mine. Jake's approach had been perfect, overwhelming force applied with surgical precision, designed to educate rather than eliminate. Madison learned her lesson, faced consequences that matched her actions, and apparently used the experience to become a better person. Sometimes I still think about that destroyed baby shower, the shattered glass sparkling in the afternoon sun, the humiliation of being abandoned by my own sister during one of the most vulnerable moments of my life. But now those memories don't bring pain, they bring gratitude. Because that afternoon of destruction had revealed who my real family was. Not the sister who'd tried to sabotage my motherhood, but the brotherhood of warriors who'd surrounded my house to make sure nothing like that ever happened again. When people ask me about marriage to a Navy SEAL, I tell them the truth. You're not just marrying a man, you're joining a family that will literally surround your enemy's house if they threaten you. And for a woman who'd grown up feeling like she had to fight her battles alone, that kind of backup changes everything. Sam's first word wasn't mama or dada, it was huya, learned from his uncle Marcus during one of their daily tactical training sessions in our backyard. Some mothers might find that concerning. I found it perfect. Because in this family, we don't just survive our battles, we win them, decisively, together. And Madison Matthews learned that lesson the hard way, surrounded by 12 Navy SEALs who decided she needed their undivided attention. She was lucky they were professionals who believed in proportional response. Because in their world, threatening a teammate's pregnant wife isn't just unacceptable, it's a declaration of war. A war she never had any chance of winning. Looking for more? We've got 2 amazing stories ready for you right on screen. If this one touched you, these are absolutely worth your time. Click to watch them now. And hey, subscribe and hit that bell to never miss our latest uploads.